Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I want to first welcome our guests because I know they're coming with several things that I deem very expensive. And first, that is their time. Time is one of the most precious commodity available to the human spirit today. And I want to thank our guests for coming and spending this quality commodity with us so that we can learn and walk with them. The second is their journey. It houses much pain, much joy, wisdom, celebration of the dark places. And so I want to thank them that they are entrusting us with that energy and that information as we embark on this conversation. And so I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. Cecilia, thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. That's the first thing I want to say. I just feel so much joy having just had that little brief conversation before we went on air, and that's the energy that I'm feeling is excitement and joy just to be here with you, to have this opportunity to share my journey. I will introduce them. So I am Celia Barsby. I live in the UK. It's a beautiful sunny day. We have blue skies. We don't all have blue skies in the UK. And so I'm just feeling this real clarity coming into our conversation. And, that's the energy I'd like to call in, that as
Yes.
I'm speaking to you, you would really be able to receive that message. My journey has been one of transformation and overcoming the trauma, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later in the conversation. The result of all of that, I believe that our deepest wound is our greatest medicine. And for me, that has resulted in a beautiful book called The Garden Party, which is my journey. So as a transformational coach, I bring 40-something years of teaching experience. And I just love working with women particularly who are ready to receive their medicine, to uncover their medicine, to reawaken to their soul's purpose. So that's me, Celia Barsby, and I'm sure Ken is going to post links and everything about where you can find out more about.
Oh, definitely.
So that's a little brief introduction.
We'll provide all of that stuff and so that they can get access and come into your space, because that's our purpose. We want them to get into your space so that you can then take them to the next level of their human, I call us human spirit development. So that is my hope, that they would get to you. As they hear your journey, I want people to know that they're not alone, that those that are attracted to your energy will then seek you out and become one of your disciples, because I tell people disciples are the ones that change the world. And so here we go. Let's talk about your family life, because this is interesting to me, because it is the first space by which we as human spirit enter into this particular unit. And in some cases, it is a safe space. In others, it is not. But I call it, whether it's safe or not, I call it the lab. So we are in the lab, and our parents and societies, everyone starts to program us. Talk to us about your family unit and how was that?
Okay, so I mean, this is just so beautiful. My book, The Garden Party, is my journey, and that's exactly where I start with a family unit. There was quite an idyllic childhood. I was born to parents who were old for their generation. I mean, nowadays, families are having their kids later. But for my parents, my mum was 34, my dad was 39. That was old, back in the 60s to be thinking of having a baby. And so there I arrive on this planet. As I say, an idyllic childhood. I lived in beautiful places, and my journey actually follows those lovely English places, all of the places that people love to visit. So we started in Oxford, and then I moved to Chester. And it was in Chester that I talk about my life being turned on its head, upside down, when my father died when I was only 10 years old. Very, very suddenly. No warning. He was there one day when I went away off to school. I knew he wasn't quite himself, and that was the last I saw of him. And he died that day of a heart attack. And what happened to me on that day and it's only the years of work that have helped me uncover this.
Yeah.
But what happened on that day of this lively, energetic, slightly too noisy little girl that I was, always in trouble with my mum because I was too loud and I was too noisy and I didn't sit still and all of that. She actually just closed up and went into a box because now she had to be good. She mustn't upset her mum. I lost the connection with my masculine because of the severance of that relationship. And that has been my healing journey of how I reconnect myself with all of my masculine qualities of stepping into my leadership, of having the confidence and the focus to lead from a feminine place, but I needed to be complete. And that is, it's when I reflect on what happened all of those years ago, then I start to see how that program, you talked about programming, we see our world through filters. So those filters were, the world isn't a safe place because the people you love are going to be taken away from you. I lost my Nana, who was very, very close to her son who died. She died shortly afterwards. So the two people that I loved most, with all due respect to my mum, left me. So that is my first filter. And I have to be good. And I mustn't do anything to upset anybody. Here's another one. It's all my fault. I took on that responsibility of making sure that everybody was happy.
Yeah.
And that followed me through my life for a number of years, so that in my marriage, I married very young, seeking the security from a masculine that had been taken away. And you can look back and see these filters.
Yeah.
And it, every time there was a challenge on our relationship, well, it was all my fault, wasn't it? It must be all my fault. It was that. I love that idea of filters that come in place. And then that's how we see everything. It's like, I always talk about, you need to change your glasses.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's the healing journey that we travel on to reawaken, to say, and it's, I think that was so important is that it's not that any of those experiences and the challenges, I have no regrets about those experiences, because I believe that these are the lessons that my soul gets to learn in this lifetime. And that's how we change and develop. In my program, I talk about going through the mill, where we look at the challenges of life when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel totally crushed by expectation. But how do we use those? How do we learn from those experiences? Because I actually believe we learn more when we are under that sort of pressure than when everything is all rosy in the garden. I have a lot of garden analogies.
I don't think we grow. I think it's a time when there's no pressure, is a time of maybe, if we understand it, there's the principle that there's a season and time for everything. That when we have nothing going on at the time, I think it's a time to rest. And it's not to say that you're not growing, but it's one to learn to look inward, reflect, enjoy the rest, because the pressure is there to bring out the creator within us, the changer of situations. And he that spirit, when I say he, I'm referring to the spiritual aspect of us, just sitting there waiting to give him the recognition. You have to recognize him and then give him permission to do the work. But it's a lot of work. And so
I love that. That's that whole integration. And as I say, you know, I love the metaphor and the symbolism of the garden, that our gardens have a time of winter when everything, you know, all of the compost starts to decompose and re-energize. And when we don't have that time of rest and integration and just absorbing all of the lessons and just allowing that to filter through our system, that's, I think, when we experience burnout, which I did, you know, hands up, yes, bought the t-shirt, because it was overgiving and overspent because I needed to justify myself. And that, I think, is that, again, you know, referring to my book and my program, is all about, I have a beautiful section. It's called Stop and Smell the Roses, where we actually stop and we celebrate all that we're learning and just allowing that to really sink into every cell of our being. Beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
I think we get there as a result of walking through the experience, because when you have walked through and you have learned, the wind feels different. You recognize the presence of the wind. You recognize the barking of a dog, the whistling of a bird. You recognize those things much more so than if you haven't gone through. You recognize it to be thankful of it and to rejoice in the music of it and the beauty of it. And I think as we go through that, it's the journey, the dark places. I think it's a opportunity to strip away the lens that covers our eyes, our spiritual eyes, the darkness. And as we begin to strip those, people call it the onion layers. As we begin to take those layers off of our spiritual eyes, we begin to see clearly. And then, as you stated, we recognize and obtain our soul purpose. And I always tell people, when you find your purpose, you become purposeful. And so it is our duty to find the purpose, because we become purposeful within this. Talk to me about this young girl now. This happened at a young age. How did that, I know you mentioned a little about it, but as you're growing up as a young woman, you're in high school, how did that situation cause you to have your relationship with those outside of you as you're maturing on this planet and you're going through your ages? How did you react to the different types of people, the male within your life and the female, as you make this exchange, being hurt from your grandmother and your dad?
Yeah, I was different. I became very aware that I was different. Now, I know that, I mean, I went into teaching, and that I would have lots of children, and you know, I then taught older kids as well. And there were lots of families who, you know, there was mom and there was dad and there was stepmom and there was stepdad, and there a sort of, you know, a more expansive family group. And I think that is now. I'm talking about 1971, when I went to my secondary school, and I was the only girl in my class who didn't have two parents living together. You know, I was the only one that didn't have two parents. And so I became very aware that I was different. And so there is that desire to want to fit in. And so, again, there's a sense of trying too hard. You know, I've got to do better than anybody else because I am at a disadvantage, because I don't have these two parents. Something interesting that has come up for me in some of the more recent work that I've done around my healing journey, I will refer to it as that, is actually there was a lot of jealousy of my friends who had a father who, Father's Day,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
hard. I couldn't join in. I didn't have that strong masculine role model.
Mm-hmm.
I had probably quite a, I'm trying to think of a word without, misaligned relationship with the opposite sex. So there we go. And that was something, and I felt that I had to conform. So there's this idea of needing to fit in. I was different and I couldn't fit in. So the relationship with boys when I was at school was very skewed, because I was so desperate for that male attention. And my relationship with my female friends was ultimately, when I look back, was from a place of jealousy. That they had something I didn't want. So the quickest thing I could possibly do was to find somebody who I could quote unquote marry, who was going to be a fit. This and it's not a case of this one will do, but more or less the first person who took a serious interest in me when we were at school, that's who I married. I have 3 beautiful children as adults, but when I went through my transformation, I call it a breakthrough, not a breakdown. The world would like to tell me I had depression and I had a breakdown. I can now see that was my breakthrough, but that complete transformation of really accepting who I was and the role that the place that I have in this world, my marriage didn't survive that because I was so completely different. So I then experienced again the loss of my masculine, the male in my life, which allowed me possibly to work through again the whole. Okay, so what happens when people leave you? But actually, from that place of breakthrough, from being in my deepest, darkest shadow place, and I love what you say. We get to learn to see in the dark, and that's been the biggest transformation for me. And has enabled me to meet who I believe is my soulmate, and actually have that masculine connection with another creative soul, interestingly enough. It's though when we are all creative, we are born creative. I was listening to something the other day and somebody said, we're all born creative, but we forget along the way.
And the journey is here to wake us up, to remind us of it. Because I believe that in my belief system, I believe that is the purpose of the journey. As I mentioned, there's someone that is residing within us, that is sitting there, that we are not aware of. And it is the dark places that it becomes awaken. And usually it is something traumatic in our life. And I say to people, it is at that place when that invitation arrives, that suddenly, that until, when the until shows up, we are just simply drifting. We are not in an awareness. The until comes for us to embark upon the most honest relationship that we will ever have with ourselves. Until then, we have not been honest. And that space right there, we began to look and investigate. Why am I here? How did I get here? What is my belief system that brought me here? And as we began to investigate who we are and the results of our past living, we then began to question, and we have the opportunity to go, wait a minute, this is not who I am and who I want to be. I want something else. And when we make that agreement with ourselves, at that place, it houses so much power, because I say to people all the time, find your statement of faith. And that is what you believe more than anybody. You got to believe this thing more than anybody, your husband, your kids, anybody. You believe this so much that sometimes the person that you are with is not the person that you need to be with. And
Yeah.
so that honest the conversation within yourself begins your journey. And I think that is the most beautiful place to be, because when you are awakened, then you begin to go through your journey and you learn who you are. So talk to us as you're learning who you are once you encountered your until. What was the first revelations that you start to get there?
Well, I think it follows on beautifully from what you were saying there about the responsibility that it is. I get to choose. I get
Yes.
to decide. I have woken up, and in my program's called Free to Be Me, and in Free to Be Me, we start with, where are you now? And
Yes.
here I am. I've woken up. It's a bit like being catapulted or parachuted into a place, and you go, right, this is where I am now. Is this where I want to be? And if it's not where I want to be, where do I want to be, and how am I going to get there? And that is very much that awakening. And the big piece for me there is about permission. And and again, it's this responsibility. I get to give myself permission. And just as you have given yourself permission. And there was a sense of, nobody else can give you that permission. You get to say, this is my permission slip. I claim it. We can witness you. We can, we can cheer you on and go, yes, that's brilliant. But you get to give yourself that permission. So I think that it was the first piece for me where I said, I have permission. I am free to be me. I am allowed to be my authentic, rebellious, quirky self. And this is who I get to be. This is how I get to be in the world. This is how I am showing up. So there is that I think that is the start. That is when you're awake, it's well, where am I? Where am I? Where am I now? Is this right for me? And then it's about feeling free to speak your truth, free to say, actually, this isn't working for me. Actually, this is what I want out of my life. Not very long ago, 6 months ago, I declared that I didn't want to be working in the education system anymore. I wanted to bring this medicine. There's this pull from the inside to say, what I have learned is there to serve other people. This is not just, this is a really interesting journey I've been on, and I'm not going to tell anybody about it. And there was that real pull of the universe to say, no, tell your story. You get to share this. You get to speak, no matter how unusual that might be. Women of my age are supposed to be retiring and going and sitting quietly in a corner, and you go, was I ever going to be doing that? Probably not. Because actually that's, I was different. I didn't fit in. And it's that very, that's what keeps you going. You go, oh, well, actually, no, I'm not supposed to be doing this the same as everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the process, is that you can be trusted with the information to then share. I think those that, and I may be wrong, but I think some of those that cannot be trusted do not go through, because the journey is not for those that are selfish. In the journey, one becomes selfless. But if you become selfish, in the sense where you've gone through and you hoard your experience, you've lost your purpose. The purpose is that once you have exited, in the sense, your journey is continual until you die, but exited to the place where you can now turn around and serve someone. Because you then, when you serve from the place that you came from, I believe you acquire what in the Christian belief system is called the anointing for that specific thing. Meaning that the energy that you release your words, because you're familiar with that, becomes very powerful. And you can stay within that lane, but if you step out of that lane, you don't have that. You're not familiar with it. But when you're in that space of where your journey has taken you and you've come out, oh man, when you open your mouth, anyone around you know that, wait a minute, this person is different when they are speaking on this subject, because you're carrying with you an authority that is powerful. And that's the stuff that is used, because those energy, the words that we speak carry energy. And when you release it into someone's life, it'll spin them out of control and get them back on their feet so that they can recognize the greatness that is there.
That is. I mean, I do a lot of energy work, and I'm trained as an energy healer as well. And before we met today, I just, we prepare ourselves. We prepare the message that we want to bring, and there was a real sense of that coming from my heart through my voice. That it's not. This is not something I have I have learned, but it's not something I've learned academically. I've learned it from a heart space. Those are the words. That's the frequency that those words carry. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So as you had your Until, and what were some of those tools that you utilize to help you walk through your awakening? Some people utilize yoga. Some people utilize meditation. What were some of those tools that were easy for you to assimilate to help you to navigate through this new awakening?
I love that. It's sort of gathering your tools together. I have this sort of visualization of this beautiful toolbox and the things we've picked up along the way that we didn't even realize were tools. We went, I don't know what this is for, but I'll put it in just in case. I think one of the first tools that was given to me, I wanted to develop a journaling practice. And so I started writing every morning. I write, following Julia Cameron's Artist Way. There was I actually bought the book 2 years before I started reading it, because I didn't think I was an artist. So if I wasn't an artist, I couldn't possibly follow a book called The Artist Way. And at the point I acknowledged and accepted myself that maybe I could be, I was able to use that tool. So I started a regular journaling practice. And what that enabled me to do was get all of the stuff out of my head onto paper, and a lot of the time I've never even read. I've gone back recently and read some of the early stuff, but it wasn't about reading it and analysing it. It was just getting it out. Yeah. So combined with that is a creative practice where I also will then quite often just layer colour over the top of my writing, or I will add images to that process. So I've got information coming in. So it's a very creative tool that actually allows me. That was one really big tool. I'm trained as well as a cosmic smash booking guide, and that has been quite transformational. And on my website, people can read more about that journey. So I've got that writing. So when we talk about how our subconscious and our unconscious speaks to us, it is often through color. Well, it is first through color, and symbol, and then word, and all of that sort of mixing together then allows me to process what is going on in my world. It has allowed me to understand my journey a lot more at a deeper level. I do practice yoga. I am not a guru, but I do, the energy work as well. I think that yoga started me on that journey where I wanted to learn more about the chakra system and how that energy moves through my body. That led me to the energy work. So again, that's another tool that's come into my toolkit, which, is still open.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
going, what, I'm learning moonology certification,
Yeah.
and I am a lifelong learner. I mean, I will never. I enjoy learning new things.
Yeah, I think
And
those that are awakened, they become that. They
yeah,
become students because the
yes,
first project that you become a student of is yourself. And so when
yeah,
you began to study yourself and began to ask the questions and delve into the understanding of you, as you get in, human behavior becomes interesting, art becomes interesting, music, the things that most people take for granted becomes interesting to you, and you have this ever increasing desire to learn and to find out even more about who you are. And I think that's the beautiful thing about when you get to that place. I consider that's living. As you state,
yes,
until we begin to do that, we drift, and until we come to the place where we are making our own choice, the freedom to make our own choice. And that's the beginning of our journey, is the awakening to begin to make our own choice and not just to drift along in the matrix, as they say. What were some of those emotional things, for a lack of a better word, are those thoughts? And you had mentioned some of them that you gave permission to become monsters in your life. And how did you overcome them when it came to looking at you, the individual, as yourself? One, how did you begin to look at that and say, okay, this is something I need to deal with? What were some of those? Because we all have those that we have to face
yeah.
as we move through our journey.
I think when it comes to my limiting beliefs, I believe are the voice of my inner critic. Now, I think what was transformational for me was and I still have the journal page where it says, today I accept the inner critic as part of me. And
Mm-hmm.
the inner critic is my voice of fear. Now, my voice of fear is, from the reptilian brain. It has a really, really important job to do, which is to keep me safe. And so it is, that's the voice that I listen to when I go to cross the road and when I get in my car, to make sure I'm driving safely.
Yeah.
However, the inner critic gets a little bit confused about when they're driving and when they
Mm-hmm.
need to go and have a little lie down.
Yeah.
But there is also the inner critic is, I believe, is in my shadow. So I'll give you an example, of quite a recent example, of the inner critic shows up for me sometimes as the saboteur who
Mm-hmm.
wants to hold me back, stop me doing the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
But the opposite of that is actually that procrastination energy actually allowed, when I shift that perspective and go, okay, come on then, I need you on board. Instead of being the opposite of a saboteur, if you look it up in the dictionary,
Mm-hmm.
the antonym, if we're going to go down the word energy, is
Mm-hmm.
helper. And you go,
Yeah.
right, instead of trying to, hold me back, how about you come on board and you help me with this?
Yeah.
Now, this conversation goes on
Yeah, it does.
on the page, on my
Yeah.
smash book.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I have a new word. I haven't got it in the dictionary yet. I think it's called gardenating. Now that's when I am meditating while I am gardening.
I
I need
love
to
it.
adopt this word
Yeah.
because these are the things that while I am weeding and clearing out
Yes.
pots and chopping back stuff, this is when I get that integration and I start to get this
Yeah.
actually saboteur. Instead of you holding me back, how about you come on board and help
Yeah.
and now come out of the shadow and become part of the empowerment. That has been quite transformational for me. There was a time when I wanted to shut my, shush them and don't talk to me. And you go, well, actually, that's no way to talk to ourselves, is it? We wouldn't
No.
talk to our
No.
friends like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd
Yeah.
say some horrible things to ourselves.
Yes. We sure do.
and actually that whole process of writing it all down. And sometimes I'll say to me, okay, what's going on? Tell me, so let's sit down and have a cup of tea. And I give them the pen in, quote unquote, and I just write. And there gets to a point every time when you go, oh, really? That you don't mean that. And they go, oh, okay.
Yeah. I think it's good to give all of it a voice.
Yes.
And as you give all of it a voice, it is you. And so that aspect of yourself needs to speak, because if it doesn't, it can then become a problem. And I think you don't, if you say be quiet to a person all the time, it affects them. And so if you say that to yourself, it will affect you. So you have to give it the voice. And I love your illustration that you gave it. You give it pen and paper and said, plead your case, and give it the opportunity to plead its case. And then at some point you look at the case and you go, really? Are you kidding me? And so, but at least that conversation, when it's finished, it is finished. Then that part of you now becomes a helper to facilitate what you were trying to put together, but you gave it a voice. And it's important, I believe, for us to always remember that, to give that part of ourselves the voice, the opportunity to speak, because it is necessary. If we're not in tune, and we haven't explored all of the avenues out there. And once you give that person and that part of you the opportunity to speak, then what happens is that perspective, when you say really, that perspective right there begins to change and adapt, and it becomes the helper. So talk to me now. You've got all these things in this, that journal. How did you get from journal to book? What was that thought process? What was the situation that caused that transformation, that journey to begin?
Ooh, so that's quite a biggie, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting. So I believe that, and I think this is true for a lot of people, that what comes so naturally and easy to us, we don't see as special. We don't, I can describe my life of, growing up and where I am, and I lost my dad, and then this happened. And I, until recently, didn't see how that could help anybody else. And I was through the community that I am in with the energy medicine. I connected with somebody whose gift is actually saying, well, actually, that's your medicine. Your story is your medicine. Yeah. And in order to have opportunities to speak to beautiful people like you, I need to be, I need to speak my truth. I need to say, hey, this is who I am. I get to be vulnerable. I get to be seen. I get to be heard in this case. And so the book was really interesting because I had done the healing work prior to writing the book. The book wrote itself. I didn't trip up over any trauma that I have experienced because I had done the healing work. So although the book, a lot of people who've read it, either on Kindle or the paperback, have said it made me cry. And they felt that emotion on the journey. One of them, it was my birthday a couple of days ago, and a friend of mine, actually a friend from school from years ago who I haven't heard from, she bought my book. It came out at the end of May. And her birthday message to me, I've got the chills just saying this. Her birthday message said, "Thank you for reawakening me and changing my life." And you go, oh my goodness, that is such a gift. And that's why I do it. That's why I've got the book. That's why I just want to tell people about, you can do this. You can do this. You have permission. So that's really the book emerged. I think it's always been there, and finally it said, right, okay. It's interesting. In my little journals, I have a little, what I call a doodle book, because I don't call myself I'm not a classically trained artist. I throw paint and stuff at, paper and canvas.
Yeah.
But I have a little doodle book, and I'd been for a walk with my grandchildren, and we went to a sort of labyrinth that's been created in our local woods. And I don't remember writing this at all, but I found it the other day, and it just said, "Tell your story."
Wow.
And I went, and that was about a year ago.
Wow.
And it is our story that I believe holds the medicine, and that's what we bring, what we can bring to the world to serve. This is all about, my wish is, I talk about how I have a gift of holding space for people while they do that transformational work. So that, and how much fun. I mean, I know this is, you can't see this, people, but this is beautiful. This is my baby. I wish you could see my baby. She has a sibling, which is a gratitude journal, which has come because I believe gratitude is such an important part of this whole package, that
vital part.
As we develop a gratitude practice, that's when things start to shift. And
absolutely.
So that really was, and that was my journey, and the start of the book and my new website, rebranding my program so that it became more accessible. It became easier to understand what I was talking.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of the journey, and we have to bring it to a place where we become servant. And on the onset of our conversation, I said there's a couple of things that the journey brings us to our awareness. First, it introduces us to ourselves. And as we go through the journey, we accumulate, we take our compass, and then we look at the map and start getting direction as to where to go, because we're lost, because it is a new space. And so within that journey, as we begin to do those the steps, we gain knowledge, we put these different hats on, perspective shifts, we get to recognize our gift, this thing that makes us joyful deep within the spirit. And as we began to examine that, we began to take notes, do things, we write, some people sing, some people do all kinds of different. And then once we get there, we put it in a format. I tell people what we do, we go through our journey and we are picking up all these different spices, and then we're throwing it into this dish. And eventually this dish becomes such a flavorful dish, and it tastes good, and it's just right. And we put it out in different formats, podcasts, books, and all these different things, so that people can taste it and partake of this beautiful thing that is us. And once they taste that, they say, wait a minute, I can do that. And so that is the purpose of the journey, is to awaken them. And I want to thank you for coming, those that have been listening to this conversation. Oh, what a beautiful story that she has laid out for us to get some insight so that we can become better human spirits. I love every bit of it. And I want you guys to get in touch with her, get into her space, buy her books, get into her classes, get her energy, and be transformed. Be changed in your mind, in your spirit, in your body. Think different about yourself and take the chance and make that connection. And I guarantee you, the purpose of these folks, like our precious Celia here, is so that they can escort you to the next phase of your human spirit development. You are great. You have greatness in you. And this person that I'm talking to will help you to see that from a conversation, because she knows the questions to ask you that you are not aware of, that you need to ask to see who you are. I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been brilliant.